So hello guys, I hope you're all well and having a lovely week. Tonight, Middlesex University Product Design Engineering and Design Engineering are excited to host the 16th talk in the annual guest lecture series. So this series runs weekly throughout the academic year on Thursday evenings, and we bring together a vibrant mix of speakers from across the full spectrum of design and engineering. A mix of leading practitioners, opinion leaders, radical thinkers, and emerging talents to inspire and support your professional development. Tonight, we're delighted to host Tobias Schreier. He's a founder, he's a product designer, and an innovation consultant from Germany and currently based in Colombia. So who is Tobias? I'm sure he'll tell you more about himself. But after graduating from Middlesex University Product Design, Tobias found himself working as an industrial designer originally in Germany. He had an experience of running a startup previously as well, and he was in touch with lots of internationally operating clients doing workshops with them. He then decided to focus on facilitating and training employees of large corporations to become more innovative and agile again. So Tobias worked as an innovation consultant and coach at Launchlabs in Berlin until 2021. He was also an industrial designer at Indeed Innovation in Hamburg. Tobias went to found his own company, mevolute, which then moved on to rebrand to x.co in 2022. Tobias has a keen interest and a lot of activity in blockchain, crypto, Web3 since 2017, and is currently based in Medellin in Colombia, where Tobias is giving us the talk tonight from. So as usual, guys, feel free to gather your thoughts, your questions, your comments in the chat throughout the talk. We'll have Q&A at the end as well. And there's also the option to go live and talk and interact with Tobias after the main talk as well. And without any further ado, over to Tobias with a talk titled Creativity and Design for Web3, Harnessing Community, Collaboration, and AI to Design Better. All yours, Tobs.
All right, thank you. Hello, everyone, and thanks for a nice introduction. I'm really happy to be here. Like my last talk was in 2019, I think, on site in London. This time a bit different, a bit further away from London. This time I'm in, as Ahmed said, in Medellin, Colombia. Been here for, let's say, a couple of months, 6-7 months in total. And yeah, trying to kind of harness what this country has in terms of innovation and potential to build companies and to kind of really work on meaningful projects. And that in my realm, basically Web3. So anything that has to do with blockchain, with crypto, and so on, especially in the markets of Latin America or in other emerging markets. Crypto plays a huge and important role because you see that their government is not as stable as we might be used to in Europe or in the UK, and also really the banking system is not as reliable as well. And so that's why people are always trying to look for new things to really kind of take on ownership. And when we talk about ownership, Web3 is a really let's say leading new industry that helps everyone to really kind of take ownership and build projects and also kind of be more involved with their finance. But before I go more into my overall talk, I'd just like to kind of say what I've planned so far tonight. It might be a bit too much, so we might not get through everything or like in that much detail, but I really want to highlight what it is all about to kind of develop products in Web3, to be collaborative, and what it means to build community, and also to harness the collaboration, not just with people, but also with AI. I'm sure you all also talked about that, the new potentials of tools that we have. And of course, we also kind of at Ext, or me at Ext, we also always look into these new developments. And I just want to really kind of tell you what we found so far, working on several different projects, and how we use these tools and how maybe you can also use them in your work right now or later on after university. So I'll just do a short intro and also talk a bit about design thinking, because I've been a design thinking trainer and coach for the past, let's say, 4 to 5 years. So what that means, and also then going more into projects, kind of a couple of different examples that are design related and also research related in Web3, and what the failures are so far, what we can learn, and what we can do better in the future. And then we talk about all these collaboration tools, collaboration with people, with AI, and maybe a couple of methods that I and my colleagues also usually utilize in our work with companies. And then we go to the Q&A that Ahmed already mentioned. So just briefly again, about me, right now in Medellin, Colombia. Medellin is a very innovative city. I think in 2012, it got the title of the world's most innovative city. And that after, let's say, in 2000, it was one of the most dangerous cities in the world, which I find really exciting, how you can transform from the most dangerous place in the world to the most innovative place in the world. And I really see that here, that we talked about it briefly. It's a spirit that everyone sees we need to change, and we need to take on our own projects. And that's what everyone does here. The city has an innovation department. They work a lot on open innovation with companies all around the world, and also with their own workshops, with their design researchers, with their innovation consultants, and so on. I studied product design as well at MDX, graduated in 2016, I think, and then worked as a product designer, moved into innovation consulting, and that's where I built my experience also, and alongside that in Web3. So I started, like the usual path, probably. I started in trading, in crypto, just a bit of, like investing, I would say. And in the end, what this industry for me stands for is real innovation and making. So not just talking about something, but really trying things out, experimenting, and let's say trying, and later on ask for forgiveness in a way, which is not always good, but sometimes it's also good to kind of bring an industry forward. And yeah, motorsport lover, and in crypto since 2017. So like crypto has been for me, like I saw it more from the financial side in the beginning, and I think most people still see it like that. And that reminded me that I've always been kind of interested in the financial space and fintech space. So that's my final year project, actually, from Middlesex, where I worked on financial health for people as well. And I called that product Coin, even though I didn't have anything to do with crypto back then. It kind of showed up in my first research, I think, in the first year in 2013, but I unfortunately didn't do more with it. I should have. But that's where my interest in all of that comes from. And also now I'm focusing more on that. I also gave that talk in Medellin. Here's just like that's a crypto space, basically, like a physical space. It's called Hash House. So basically, where like everyone all around the world, when they stop by in Medellin, kind of try to network and really try to collaborate as well on projects. So that's why they call it Medellin the real crypto valley. So where all these innovative products, services are supposed to be born and kind of developed. And talking a bit more about Web3, it's an industry that's mostly misunderstood right now, I would say, and is mostly very niche, because there's many people in crypto and Web3 that have been there for a long time, and they know all the technical details around it, and that's how they also kind of build their products, right, from a very technology driven side. But as product design students, I remember at latest in the second year, or like actually right from the beginning of my bachelor's, It was always about, we are developing products, or we're designing for people. And that's what I see lacking still in the Web3 era as well as of now, because it makes sense. Like, blockchain comes from a very technological perspective, and so a lot of developers work on that, and they build amazing products, amazing new financial products, and metaverse and everything all around that. But you always see that the human side is a bit missing. And that's why when I give this talk, I think it's important to just highlight again why design, or what design stands for, and how we can apply design thinking to the actual Web3 space. And I think I'm sure you all know where like design thinking comes from. I remember actually in our bachelor course, we never really talked about design thinking per se, because when you study product design, you just learn how to work in design, and you don't have to think about a formal way or a formal process, because you have to understand people, you have to kind of do research, then find problems and build new solutions, and then test these things with prototypes, right? But you always have to imagine, when you work in companies, not everyone is trained as a designer. And that's why it's important to actually kind of formalize a process and make a framework out of it, so that also other people, let's say people working in finance, working in management purely, really understand the importance of design, and that design is not just something to make things pretty or to style things, but really to find out what people need and how to build better products. And so IDEO, I'm sure we worked on open IDEO challenges. That was amazing. I always like to look back on that. And so IDEO formalized this process. They kind of built that course at Stanford University, and their goal was to bring human-centered product development to more and other disciplines, and create a common language in big corporations or companies. And I always try to kind of find an example. I don't know if we can have like a quick kind of, or let me know if you kind of heard of this example, because it's a typical design thinking example. I will just briefly go through it, because you work that way, what these students at Stanford University also did to actually build this sleeping bag, basically. So this group of students, they went to India or Pakistan, and also really tried to find out why there's a high mortality rate in like young kids, and also like kids that have just been born. And they literally found that these people, these kids, these babies cannot survive because they cannot maintain their warmth and their temperature. And so what they could have done is, they come from the States. They could have said, look, we're just collecting money, and we buy like more incubators for their hospitals. Yes, we could have done that, because in the Western world we have that, but they really went there on site and saw the context, they saw the environment, and then they realized pretty quickly, by also talking to people, like, first of all, the way to the hospitals are too long. So they couldn't, like, these kids, like, mostly also might die on the way to the hospital. And also the families actually don't want to give away their children and put them in like huge machines and incubators. So that's how they kind of found, look, we need an alternative solution. We need something that is more portable and is different. And that's how they came up with this sleeping bag, after several iterations, after prototyping and so on, doing more and more research. And they came up with this with this sleeping bag that has a wax-like material in it, where they can heat that up all the time whenever they want. And basically that's how they managed to kind of decrease this mortality rate. And they did that by utilizing the typical design thinking process that has been formalized by at Stanford University and later on at the Hasso-Plattner Institute in Potsdam in Germany. And I'm just briefly mentioning all these 6 steps because you kind of know what it means to really look at people, like really go into the footsteps of people, of the user group that you're designing for, and then kind of coming up with ideas, with concepts, prototyping, and then testing. And that's what you're trying to do in this formalized process as well. You know, the double diamond. But for, as I mentioned, for companies where you have also a lot of people that are not trained as designers, it's easier to understand this like by taking this framework and literally going through this process. So understanding what you have at hand, the project you have at hand, what data do you already have, what can you build on this data, can you kind of use that research already, and then do more and further research, especially empathic research. So really going into the field, doing interviews with people, empathize with them, and then later on synthesize all this data that you found and coming up with a how might we question, and then ideating all around that. Well, quantity of ideas, you know, like I remember like what Win always said, like, yeah, like really kind of build ideas, and then later on you can really, by prototyping them, see what it actually, like what concept works and what doesn't, and then of course always testing, getting feedback early on from your users. And that's how in companies you develop products, that's how you develop services, that's how you develop new business models, but also internally strategies and new processes internally for huge companies. And that's how you can utilize design thinking as well, because essentially people working at companies, colleagues, are also people, right? And that's why we also internally need design for people. And now, yeah, there we go. So that's how we really achieve sustainable innovation. We start by looking at the human desirability, going into the technical feasibility, and then also the business viability. That should never be forgotten. You know, utilizing the business model canvas, for example, to see, look, does this concept really work, what I'm working on, or do I need to tweak something so that potentially there could be a better business model in the end. And in companies, or especially in general, in any development, it's important not to be alone, but to kind of build multidisciplinary teams. I'm going into that later on as well. So in companies, you always talk about the T-shaped people. So that's like people that really have one discipline and have an expert knowledge in something, but they also utilize design thinking, so this framework, as a common language, and that's their general knowledge. So that's how they can communicate better, can collaborate better, and then in the end come up with better products. And now going into more of like the examples, and I chose kind of Don Draper from Mad Men. I hope like some of you know the series. It's been a while that it actually ended. And Don Draper was really good at really knowing, especially for marketing, what the target audience is for their clients, right? And that's why they, like you see on this picture, they actually, the client is Heinz, so Heinz ketchup, right? But on these concepts that they have in the back that you see there, they actually don't show ketchup, right? They don't show the typical bottle. They actually show fries, they show a hamburger, they show like a sausage, and they just say, pass the Heinz. And you know, like usually you would say, no, I don't really believe that it actually works, but they built such a brand and such a good product so that everyone kind of associated with that. And they can do that because they know their target audience. They know what this target audience expects, but then also how to surprise them. So to have the element of surprise in there. So that's how you build community, right? And that is a really important thing in Web3 as well, the community part. And one example that, and that's why I mentioned that I'm a motorsport lover, was a recent example. I don't know how familiar you are with NFTs. Maybe we can talk a bit about that later on. But basically, NFTs is digital artwork that is logged on the blockchain, so you can always kind of make sure that you can prove ownership. So when I buy an artwork, I just have to look at the transparent blockchain, and I know exactly, okay, I bought it, and no one else owns it, and I can sell it, and then someone else owns it. And it's also good to actually have royalties for artists, for example. That's in our industry very important, because sometimes when you sell one piece and then it gets resold many times, usually the artist doesn't benefit from that anymore. On the blockchain in the NFT world, that is potentially possible, and that's a really good thing as well. So lots of these brands and huge companies trying to get into the NFT space, and also Porsche, important, like really very famous maker of sports cars from Germany, also tried that. And the problem was, and I just mentioned the importance to actually know your target audience, is that they actually didn't know who they're selling to and what products they actually develop and what they develop it for. Because in this case, they don't sell a car, they sell something else. They don't, like, by selling that NFT, they literally sold that picture that you see here in the middle, with a number on it, like limited to 7,500 pieces. And that's how they wanted to kind of get into the NFT space. So what was very unclear from the beginning is, what is the utility of this NFT actually? What is the artwork? Because the artwork was also not visible. They also always just talked about lifestyle, about the typical brand they use and they build all along the way. And in the end, they also introduced the mint price. So basically, a chance when you're early on and when you're one of the 7,500 first people to get this NFT. So what do they have to pay? And they said, like, it was a nice number of 0.911 ETH, which at current prices is roughly $1,500, right, for one NFT, which is very unusual in the crypto community. You have probably 0.01 ETH, which then goes back to like $150 basically. So which is more affordable for the most people. And what they didn't do is that they actually didn't listen to their audience, because like they communicated on Twitter, because the crypto community usually kind of talks a lot on Twitter, on Discord. And what they didn't do is that they actually they didn't listen what they said on Twitter. So they didn't change the mint price. They didn't make the product more clear. So they didn't design the product actually because an NFT is essentially also a product that you design for people, right? So you need to meet the needs and wishes of the people you have in front of you. And they didn't do it, and they didn't listen. And so that's why there was a huge fail actually in the beginning. And they didn't sell out. Usually this NFT collections, they sell out within half an hour usually, and that didn't sell out. So they had to actually cut the limit, and in the end, that's why they still kind of had half of a success story, and it's worth more than the actual mint price, but potentially a lot of people could have lost money. But they pivoted later on as well. So that's, in the end, they learn from their failures by listening more to the community. Another typical example right now, I don't know how many of you actually are part of the crypto space or trying things out. When you actually work, we call it on-chain, really engage with the blockchain, it's right now really difficult to make a transaction, because you need to have a certain extension installed in Chrome or use different browser. And then you need to always kind of assign or confirm transactions through, like, the most popular product is MetaMask. And now if you just use MetaMask, it's actually very insecure to use that, because there's lots of potential that hackers could like hack MetaMask and essentially get a hold of your funds, essentially your money that is in your wallet. So that's why, like in the crypto space, there's different types of wallets, but it's always good to also have a hardware wallet, so-called hardware wallet. One of the most popular manufacturers is Ledger. And once you connect a hardware wallet with a computer, it gets even more complicated. So you have to literally go through, when you just look at that screen on the left, you see lots of numbers. You see, prior to clicking confirm, there's lots of warnings. Then you click confirm, then it opens up another app. Then you say expose your device accounts through WebSocket. Open that. Then you have to literally engage on your hardware wallet and so on. And now imagine like that the crypto community wants to onboard more mainstream users. That doesn't work, right? Again, knowing who you're designing for. You're not designing for people that have huge knowledge in technology or can do programming or whatever. It's like the next billion people, what they always call it, is not the developers. It's the people that actually just want to open an app, like you used to with the fintech apps, for example, Monzo or whatever, like any bank, any new fintech bank. And so that's the user experience you're used to right now. And that's not what you have right now in the crypto space. But Ledger actually does an important thing, and they also recognize what devices are my users actually using. And so Ledger recently introduced a Safari hardware wallet integration. So anyone on iOS or Mac can also use Safari, the native browser, to actually now engage with Web3. So literally to sign transactions, to confirm transactions. And they designed a user interface in a way that is more understandable, less numbers, more actual like warnings in a language that people can understand. And that's how you kind of onboard more people, right? Because you don't need that much knowledge of tech or of crypto to actually engage in this space. And that is one of the key tasks now that needs to be done in the future for the Web3 space. So that's why actually as designers right now, the Web3 space has a huge potential because I mean there's lots of problems right now, regulatory problems, there's lots of uncertainty. But if you look into it, especially if you want to focus on UX design and not on too much physical design, but even then you have lots of opportunity to actually go into that space and really become a, let's say, Web3 UX designer, for example. And like the crypto space has quite a lot of money actually to employ people still. And I'm just gonna give you a brief overview of how typical companies right now in the crypto space work and what they actually utilize to actually work worldwide, because the crypto space works a bit different from the rest of like the world in a way, because the crypto space has always been very anonymous and also like distributed worldwide. So it's not like that every like crypto startup sets up an office in London and everyone has to go to London and work in that office. Like the crypto space has been remote first right from the beginning. And so that's how you also need like different collaboration tools to actually work effectively and build products that are very, very common in the crypto space. One of the main collaboration tools in Web3 is Discord. Like gamers know it because that's been actually the go-to tool for gamers usually. But the crypto space, since again it comes a bit from the tech side as well, utilize that tool, and literally yeah, that's the main collaboration tool, main communication tool as well. There's others. I'm going to give you a brief overview later. And there's also a Snapshot, for example, that lets you vote on different like proposals. So how usually a crypto startup, or sometimes a DAO, a decentralized autonomous organization, I'm not going to go into that much detail because that becomes a bit too much, I think, for this talk. Usually what they do in so-called DAOs is that they put out a proposal if they want to change something or want to build something or change something on the business model. And then everyone that is part of the DAO has to vote on it on chain. So it's very transparent who voted for what. And then in the end, this vote or this proposal gets passed or not. So basically that's one of the tools that the crypto space utilizes. Of course, you have traditional tools like Trello, for example, to do classic project management, but you also have many other tools for like other communication platforms like Slack, Telegram, of course, then video conferencing tools, collaboration, GitHub, GitLab. You have, of course, the typical file sharing storage platforms. You have the blockchain-based tools like Aragon to actually really build your DAO, for example, to have this voting process. And you have other DAO-specific platforms like DAO Stack. But that's actually not too important to know all these kind of specific tools. Like what I just found in my work is that many of these tools are not very good to do empathic research. So like remember the second part of the process is empathize with people in order to kind of develop products in the crypto space. And that is not very common in the crypto space right now. I'm sure you work with some of these tools that can help, which is, for example, Miro, which then again helps you to go through all the process with also your users. So that's one of the things that's still lacking, the co-creation part. Co-create with users, not just like with people that work in that company, like all the like developers, all the designers and so on, but also engage with the users, co-create with the actual users you're designing for. And like Miro is a very good tool to actually also do video chatting in there, right? So even if you like an anonymous person that has a Bored Ape, you can still use that, but still you can talk to people and can kind of literally collaborate online all around the world. But also one of the new things that I briefly want to go into is that we have a lot of the tools to actually build better products using AI. And of course, like through ChatGPT, that is now, the #1 thing that we talk about, but we'll also utilize that in the crypto space. So for example, right now, I'm actually working on a so-called layer 2 analytics platform. So like apart from Ethereum, you have more like other blockchains basically that built upon Ethereum. And right now I'm working with a team on this analytics platform, doing the UX for them because we got an Ethereum Foundation grant. And so what you can literally utilize, and what I actually also just found, is the UI SART, basically auto designer, that gives you, for example, inspiration of what your product or what your UX could look like. Not saying that you should kind of give all that work to this auto designer, because then you make yourself redundant, right? You're studying design to actually kind of do meaningful design work. But once you kind of get into the process of, really kind of making a first draft of a UX, you can literally get inspiration from that as well. I remember when we were on the course, like Win and Andy always said, like, yeah, go around, and Ahmed as well, of course, go around and take photos, get inspiration from everywhere. And that's another thing where you can get inspiration from all these AI tools, utilizing Auto Designer and then bringing that into Figma, tweaking that, doing more testing, getting feedback early on from your users through co-creation. And that's how you develop this product much faster. You save time and money in the end. And I have a brief example as well. I'm not going to go into that much detail into that because I'm right now working on a biometric crypto wallet. So basically, what I'm working on is that through our devices like Apple Watches or other smartwatches, for example, even phones with Face ID, you have a lot of biometric data that is actually also securely stored on smartphones, for example, or smartwatches. And I'm looking right now at a way to kind of securing a crypto wallet, literally with your biometric data, maybe your pulse or literally your bloodstream and so on. It sounds crazy, but it's actually not as crazy as it seems. And I found that out pretty quickly because I kind of also, tried out ChatGPT and literally built my own team, my multidisciplinary team, even though I was alone, kind of looking into that idea. So I literally asked, ChatGPT, the researcher, so are there any kinds of wallets like that already out there? And of course, at first gave me some, some basic wallets that I already knew: Argent, Gnosis Safe, MetaMask, and so on. But it also misunderstood me what I actually mean by a biometric wallet, because I don't want to just secure it by Face ID, but I really want to generate the private key based on your bloodstream or on your heart rate pattern. Which is a very different thing and specific thing. So my learning, and I think in general, the learning when you try out ChatGPT, it won't give you a lot of good stuff in the beginning, and also not if you kind of don't ask the right questions. But then I rephrased my question. So in the end, it gave me actually down the way, actually some suggestions who I could partner with, because a lot of institutes are already working on biometrics for securing private keys in Web3 wallets. And so it gave me like things that I didn't know before, and probably would have taken me a long time to actually find out just by utilizing Google as well. So that's what I call the partnership developer, which was ChatGPT in the end. And then, some other things that down the way, I also wanted to double check, is there a potential business model out of that? And in the end, so basically you can utilize, depending on what you ask ChatGPT, utilize these different aspects and then kind of build your own on-demand multidisciplinary team. Of course, that's always just the beginning and just the start, because an AI right now, like an AI like ChatGPT, has a limited amount of knowledge and training. That's what you always have to keep in mind when you utilize AI tools. They are not the ones that kind of give you the vision that you should come up with. So I think that's one of the most important things as a designer, to kind of have the vision and to push for more, to really ask more questions. And I think most of these methods that kind of I highlight here, you can utilize by yourself and with AI. And you probably know Simon Sinek's start with why. That's always how I start as well. Why do I do something, and literally work out the purpose of it. Also that I tried for a business. I tried ChatGPT for that. And it helped me a lot doing iterations. So that was a really good thing, to kind of iterate fast and to kind of think through different perspectives really, really quickly. Also, a method like why laddering. So when you start with an initial question like, why is the user using a Web3 wallet? And then it kind of gives me out like a couple of different other questions down the line by asking why and why further. So why does the user want to use a decentralized wallet? Why is the user looking for greater control over the funds? So there's a different aspect already that you can design for. And why does the user value financial privacy? Again, different aspect that you kind of can look into. And also when you start with the different initial questions, so just doing like, why is the user not using a Web3 wallet? It gives out a couple of different questions, which was for me very interesting. It really depends on asking the right questions. And that's what we always say, right? Like that's what we do as designers, asking the right questions and then coming up with like solutions that fit for the things that we found out. And so basically there's a couple of different methods. I'm not going to go through too much into that. Affinity mapping, kind of to do the synthesizing. I'm sure you know all of that in your current daily practice, and how affinity mapping looks like. That's also very known to you. And also then coming up with the right, with the how might we questions that you can work on, and kind of to really build and ideate all around these different aspects. One of the things, I don't know if you utilize it, back in the day, I think we didn't that much, but like what I also learned in my professional practice, the method called creative matrix. which is very important, like very good ideation method. It just opens up different so-called enablers where you can like focus in on one specific area of a development, or let's say of your research, and it helps you to really ideate around different user groups. So if you haven't tried that, maybe try it out. It really it works really well in groups as well, what I find in my work in workshops. And so basically that was it. I tried to give you a kind of a brief intro into Web3, because I don't know how many I actually are looking into Web3, looking into like crypto products and so on, apart from investing and trading maybe, and also kind of utilizing the typical process of a designer, and to really kind of bring more human centricity into the Web3 space. I think that's one of my major things that I'm trying to do with Ixt, to kind of build companies, or let's say projects all around this topic, where we find different aspects, different like challenges that we have in the daily life, and how we can also utilize Web3 and the possibility that that technology gives us, and utilize that. And yeah, if you'd like to connect and also kind of scan this QR code for brief feedback, I'm always happy to receive feedback as well. And yeah, please feel free to connect with me on Twitter. If you're on a Lens protocol, there's a social media that is crypto native on Polygon. Please connect on Lens as well, and of course on LinkedIn if you like. I also have Tobsch on Instagram if you prefer Instagram. Whatever you want. Thanks for listening, and over to you, Armin.
Amazing. Tobias, that was a really interesting talk, and it was a great introduction into Web3, but you also touched on like design thinking, creative processes, methods, and building communities and collaboration tools, which also like included AI, alongside obviously the conversation and the intro into like crypto and blockchain. Fantastic talk. And guys, as usual, feel free to continue to gather your thoughts and your questions and your comments in the chat. You can go live if you wanted to, and you can ask Tobias questions and interact with him. Just put a request in the chat and we'll make it happen, guys. The first question coming through from Javier Orvi. Tobias, what's the best platform, be it a blog, a channel, or a website, to learn about blockchain and the crypto world?
That's a good question. It's also there's many different, of course, news sites that that give you always like a good starting point, which is CoinDesk, for example, or Cointelegraph. It's also the typical site where you kind of start. It's more like, let's say, crypto focused in terms of investment focused, which is CoinMarketCap or CoinGecko. Yeah, I'll start with Coin, because it's one of the sites that kind of give you a lot of links to like the important aspects in crypto as well. And especially if you want to look at it from a let's say an entrepreneurial side as well, or like also design. I think that's always interesting, design and development side. It's A16Z, a crypto startup school. They have a lot of really interesting content, how to build crypto companies, and also kind of what makes it, what's the difference between Web3, Web2, and other kind of industries. I think that's one of the starting points, the typical ones, I'd say, like really start reading. And of course, there's lots of podcasts as well. Bankless is a good podcast, especially if you want to learn more about Ethereum and so on. Ethereum is at the moment the strongest ecosystem in the crypto space. So that would be also a good starting point, a podcast.
Amazing. And I guess a second question there from Orvi Javier, touching on what you just mentioned about podcasts and so forth. Are there any experts that you recommend within this particular field in terms of following their particular podcasts or YouTube videos, or an introduction into particular angles of cryptocurrency or blockchain, for example?
Yeah, like I'm always bad with names from the top of my head. But also when you look at all the Bankless content, they mention basically all the important people as well. Like the crypto community is very very active on Twitter as well. So maybe if you also go on my Twitter account and look into who I'm following, I think there's many so-called degens also in there. You always see them with, you know, like lots of followers. So they are really really engaged. There's one very he's based in the UK, actually in England. It's Kobe. He's a really funny lad. He's amazing. So like Kobe, Cobie, on Twitter. He's I think that it's also a good starting point. He also has a podcast with another guy that I always forget the name, but the podcast is Up Only. And they were joking a lot, like because the crypto market had its downturn in the last year, and they said like they actually should rename their podcast, right, to Down Only, but they left it at Up Only to be hopeful, let's say.
Amazing. Yeah, Kobe and Ledger.
Yeah, I mean Ledger is the company to like do that do the hardware wallets basically. That's a French-based company. Yeah.
Amazing. And another question coming in from Javier. What's the best AI for designers in your opinion?
There's so many different tools out there. I mean, like I'm really try to get on the waitlist for this auto designer. I think that's an interesting bit. But right now, ChatGPT, like as I mentioned, gives a lot of like the basic like starting points and where you can build your research on. I think that for me is really important, because what I also utilize it for in workshops, when you do a basic ideation around a problem, like usually one of the first like things that come up is always the most obvious stuff, and that's what you can maybe also ask ChatGPT or like use ChatGPT for, to kind of get these basic things down, like really kind of try and in a list, and then build on that. So really combining these different ideas and like utilizing what you learn in a daily basis as well.
Amazing. Another question coming in from Mir Mishfiqul Hack. What tips can you give to someone who's looking to join cryptocurrency investment?
Investment, I have to say, no financial advice. It's so basically advice is always do your own research. That's the typical thing that you really have to do. It's don't trust on all these, you know, YouTube channels that say, look, tomorrow it's probably gonna go up and they invested so much and so much into that and do leverage trading and so on. So really, if you start, really always look a lot into the actual project, or start with the really basics. So really probably Ethereum, look how, like, first understand how this actually works. Don't ever invest in something that you don't really understand. I know most people don't, unfortunately don't do that, but that would be my advice, to really kind of maybe go to these websites that I mentioned, read like all around these topics, and then literally start maybe thinking about investing. So don't just invest like based on other people's opinion.
Amazing. And a question coming in from Omiati Manuel. Regarding design thinking, what does the synthesize part entail?
Again, what's the question again?
In terms of design thinking, and you know the double diamond, when you get towards the synthesize, what does the synthesize part entail and include?
Yeah, so basically, like the affinity mapping that I showed briefly is one of the methods that you can typically use to kind of go through all your research data, because you know, like after talking to, let's say, 10 people, I remember when we did a project for Transport for London. You know, when you go around, you talk to people, you have all these pages filled with information, and then you extract all this data, you put it on your post-its, you cluster them, and then you kind of try to find common patterns. That's basically the process, the synthesize part. And one of the tools that you can utilize there is affinity mapping, and really get kind of prioritizing what you work on first. So based on your clusters, you can then come up with different how might we questions, and you use them as a basis to do ideation.
Amazing. And that's just beautifully articulated by Toby as well. So, for example, the double diamond, you have like 4 phases. You got the discover, the research area, the define, the synthesis, you got the develop, the ideation, for example. And in terms of the design synthesis, it's where you have all of that research data, you got all of those insights which you've analyzed, and you've then synthesized these towards kind of either opportunity spaces or ideas that you can then take forward. So that's really well, I think. That's a great question there. Another question coming in is, what do you think about ChatGPT, Toby?
In general, what's that?
In general, like, what's your thoughts about ChatGPT with your usage so far?
Yeah, as I said, like that's why I mentioned it in the talk as well. I think it's an important tool to utilize and not to kind of forbid. Like I right now when I heard in Germany, like schools trying to kind of forbid again, like the new tools that we have. Definitely use them, but as always, always don't just rely on these tools. They take away some of your, let's say, rudimentary work or things that might just take a long time, but always try to push for more. I think that's my approach to it, to kind of be conscious, to kind of like don't let's say conscious to use these tools, definitely utilize them because it might save time around certain topics. Also kind of what I used it for example, to write some texts that are neatly written, because I could have never done that probably like that, based on my information, of course. And I think that's the key. You shouldn't kind of expect wonders from ChatGPT, for example, but it can help you in some of these, let's say, repetitive tasks as well, where you can just save time.
Amazing. 100%. Totally agree on that, in terms of understand the benefits and limitations, understand that it's something that will evolve, especially with all of the user input that it's learning from and training itself with as well. So on that particular note is an interesting question in terms of what's your thoughts in terms of the direction and the future of AI tools?
My thoughts are, I think that they're innovative. Like you can't stop them in a way, because there's been too much development already going, like already went into that. But it really depends how smart they get, I would say. I always say, like, I should definitely be conscious of what I'm learning right now, because like many things probably will be automated in the future by that. And by the way, there's an interesting Bankless podcast episode. It's one of the latest ones that's actually called a bit negative. We're all gonna die. But they feature a machine learning researcher, or really kind of expert, that paints kind of a grim picture all around that, but still it's interesting to learn why, or like his argumentation. I think that the reasons why he thinks it's a difficult development, but in my opinion, like any technology brings like good things and bad things with it. We just have to learn how to deal with it. And I think I'm very positive in terms of AI, and that we utilize it in our daily lives, especially in our professional lives as well as designers.
100%. And as a tool.
Yeah, exactly.
A great question there. Another one coming in from Orvi Javier, is on fire tonight. Is Web3 in the deep web?
I think that there's two totally different things. Web3 usually kind of builds its name around like taking ownership of things, because in Web2, like we have the typical example that, like all our data is owned by a centralized entity. So when when we engage here on Zoom, basically it's owned by Zoom. Then when you engage on Facebook or Instagram, WhatsApp, all the data lies with Meta, right? The same with Apple, the same with Microsoft, Google, and so on. And so basically Web3 is trying to take all of that away and kind of bring back your data, your ownership. And the key part of that will be Web3, and deep web is like something else that entirely. You can combine these two and kind of I'm sure for certain services and so on, but Web3 just talks about like more ownership and kind of utilizing blockchains and anything that kind of helps you to retain your data much better.
Amazing. A question coming in terms of your undergraduate studies. So how did you find the product design course at Middlesex University? What was your experience?
So bad. No, I'm kidding. No, I'm amazing. I especially, and I have to say, especially after like not only after my studies, but even more after my studies, I realized how much of a different approach we took, especially at Middlesex. And I always say I was well prepared for all the innovation part that I did later in my professional work. In the end, working as an innovation consultant, I saw many of my colleagues, they didn't know many of the things that I was prepared for in terms all around innovation. And I always remember Andy saying, we do innovation here. And that makes the difference, I think, from other courses as well. And that's why in the end, I really appreciated the whole course as well. And of course, like many of the things that we did, like all the tutors and so on, so because it was very practice based. That is also very, very important.
Amazing. So a question following on from that, like what learning or skills from your undergraduate studies in product design benefited you in the diverse route and pathways across industrial design, innovation consultancy, and education and so forth as well?
Yeah. Like for me, I did the BSc, but I think that doesn't exist anymore, right? The BSc with the electronics part. So what that was basically a door opener for me, like back in the day when I started my industrial design position in Hamburg, because they literally worked on it was literally sex toys that in the end I was supposed to kind of do some electronics prototyping all around. I didn't do that much in the end because I had a lot of good knowledge in SolidWorks as well. By the way, I was really grateful for that because that's one of the skills that kind of made me work really well as an industrial designer right from the beginning. I was really well prepared for the industry there. But later on, when I moved from that company into a sister company, basically Tools of Innovators, I focused then on innovation consulting, right? So training people as well, kind of also do facilitation with people in bigger companies like Deutsche Telekom or Accenture. That, like in the end, that especially we did a lot in the second year with Tom back in the day, when we did a lot of the design research and really understanding people. Which was actually not too much part in my BSc studies because like the BA studies had much more of that. But I think that now benefits me a lot more in kind of, coming up with new ideas for startups, for projects and so on.
That's amazing. And there's a lot of final year students here alongside second year students who are about to go out on placement as well. So a question coming through is, what do you wish you would have known as you were about to graduate?
Wow, that's a difficult one. What I wish there's so many opportunities out there. You always have to look. You have to kind of do constant research. I like the crypto example. I mean, I had some basic research about blockchain in my in my research in the first year, but I didn't look too much into that. So I think when you probably, it's one of the things that look back at the things that you already have and maybe get some more details about them, more understanding, try to understand more. Because once you kind of understand more around all these topics, it just is, it opens up so many new doors and ways to, you know, like come up with new concepts, come up with new companies. For me, that's especially always important because I'm always have that entrepreneurial drive, kind of, that I want to build a startup and build new startups and so on. So I think that's one of the things, kind of look back at what you already have, the data you already have, basically, like what you learned about, and learn more about it.
Amazing. And I guess the last question there is, how did you find your first job in industrial design? What was the process and your experience?
Yeah, I applied like to so many different agencies and so on. So I did the typical kind of way, you know, going from product design into an agency, basically. I first started in Hamburg, not in Frankfurt, for 3 months. That wasn't a thing for me, and along that way, I got that company, like actually got that job because I applied before that already, once I was in London. And yeah, of course, for me, it was, I think I had a benefit because of course, I studied in London as a German, you know, studied in London, then came back to Germany. And that's why I had a bit of a different CV, I think. So if you're really open, and that's one of my advices, if you're really open to kind of also like go out of the UK and go somewhere else. I know it's, you know, like with the EU, it's not that that easy anymore, but still, like, there's many other countries, right, all around the world. Look at these countries, what are you interested in, and maybe, I don't know, apply there. That's why I'm here in Colombia right now, because, you know, I find there's many opportunities here, not in terms of, you know, earning money or, let's say, I don't know, getting a job here, but working on many things here as well.
Tobias is saying, join him in Colombia, in Medellin. You can meet up for a coffee.
Exactly. Please join me. I'm going to be here until end of April, and I'll be back anyways. So maybe in May in London. We'll see. Maybe.
Amazing. Tobias, I think that naturally brings it to a close. So we'd like to obviously thank you for taking out your time and joining us tonight. It was a fascinating talk, a great Q&A session as well. And from all of us at Middlesex University Product Design and Design Engineering, thanks for your time and thanks for the session.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity, and nice talking to you. And I hope it's helpful, some aspects of it. And yeah, please feel free to connect and ask more if you want.
Definitely.
And see you soon, hopefully.
Fingers crossed, huh? So for all of the students and participants, Tobias's details were sent to your emails ahead of the talk as well, including links to Tobias's LinkedIn, Instagram, website. So definitely feel free to browse and connect as well. And to conclude, keep an eye out on your emails for the details of next week's speaker and the links to the talk as well. So until then, stay well, stay safe, and thank you guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye.